When I was a kid in the 80s, I always wanted a video camera, but they were way too expensive. Fortunately, kids in the early 2000s had a more affordable option. The Barbie wireless camera first released in 2001. I found out about this quirky camera thanks to the awesome 8-bit guy. I'll give you a quick rundown, but if you want the full story, check out this video. It's amazing. The Barbie camera didn't record internally. You had to wirelessly connect it to a receiver, which then connected to a VHS player to record on tape. Inspired by the 8-bit guy's video, I went on eBay and bought my own Barbie camera. It didn't come with a receiver or accessories, but for 15 bucks it was a great deal. So in today's video, we're going to transform this beauty into a fully modern self-contained camera that can record internally. Here's what we'll do. Install a rechargeable battery and a charging module. Add a USB-C female port so we can charge the camera without removing the battery cover. Install a mini DVR inside the camera. If you're not familiar with what a mini DVR is, I've got a video explaining it. But in short, it's a small, affordable device that lets us record analog video onto a microSD card. Install external buttons to control the mini DVR without opening the camera. Add a microSD extender so we can access the video without having to open the camera. Install a connector for external video output to a monitor. As you can see, all the parts are very inexpensive, and if everything goes well, we'll have a fully functional 2001 Barbie camera ready to record in 2024. But why go through all this trouble for an outdated video format? Because it's fun, and the video looks awesome, at least for me. Okay, let's start. First, we need to remove these two screws to take off the battery cover. I'll put in batteries just to check if the camera at least turns on. Excellent. Even the front LED lights up, so that's a good sign. Now I'll remove these 4 screws to separate the 2 parts of the casing and access the inside of the camera. We won't be using most of the internal components. We're only going to reuse the power switch to take advantage of the external plastic rotatory button. So I'm going to remove all the internal components. Some are held in place with pressure clips while others are secured with screws. I identified that the gray cable, which contains 3 wires, is the one for the camera module. I'm pretty sure one of those wires is ground, another carries the video signal, and the remaining one is for power. First, I need to find out which wire is ground. For that, I'll set my multimeter to continuity mode. Place one probe on the metal plate since they're always grounded, and with the other probe, I'll test for continuity on the 3 wires. This way, I've determined that the black wire is ground. Now, I'll put batteries in the camera to run a few tests. I'll be using a 3.5mm cable to connect it to my portable monitor and see if we get any video signal from the camera. By the way, if you want to know how to make your own portable monitor for retro cameras for just $9, I have a video on the channel showing the process and here's the link. But how will I know which wire to solder where? We already know the black wire is ground, right? So I'll assume the white is for the video signal and test it. If you're unsure how to identify the wires in a 3.5mm cable to connect it to a monitor, there's a video on my channel explaining it and here's a link. Once the connector is soldered with the camera and monitor turned on, I'll connect the monitor and see if we get an image. And perfect! The first test was successful. This part is awesome! Since my assumption was correct and the white wire is for video and the black one is for ground, the red wire must be for power. So I want to find out how much voltage the camera needs to operate. Although I know all the components requires 9 volts, I'm sure the camera model itself will need less voltage since we aren't powering the other components. So with the camera turned on, I'll measure the voltage using the red wire. And as you can see, the camera only requires around 4.6 volts to operate. Since the tests were successful, I can now remove just the camera module and discard the rest of the components. Now, just out of curiosity, I'm going to test the camera with a 3.7 volts battery. I already know the camera needs at least 4.6 volts, but let's see what happens. As you can see, there's an image, but it's very distorted, so it definitely needs at least 4.6 volts to function properly. Since my plan is to install a rechargeable battery, I'll be using this voltage booster to reach the 4.6 volts the camera needs. This is the same component we used in the monitor mod. Remember, there's a video on the channel, check it out. Now I've soldered the battery wires to the input of the voltage booster and I'm going to measure the input voltage. We are getting 3.9 volts, but we need at least 4.6 volts. The booster comes randomly configured, so I'm going to measure the output voltage. We're getting 5.1 volts, so there's no need to adjust it as it falls within the range we need for this project. Now I'll test it using the battery connected to the voltage booster, and as you can see, the camera is working properly now, so that's great. Now I can remove all the components we won't be using to make room for the installation of the mini DVR, which will allow us to record everything the camera sees internally on an SD card. As I mentioned before, we'll be reusing the power switch, the internal microphone, the external microphone connector, and the LED lights. And here we have the start of the show. First, I'm going to disassemble it by removing the 4 tiny screws. And as you can see, it's a small board powered by a battery, so my plan is to power it with the same battery as the camera. So the power switch, action buttons and the video inputs and output will all be mounted on the camera itself. I'll have to figure out how to do that. First, I'm going to remove the original battery and the power switch. I want to place a rechargeable battery and the voltage booster, which also serves as the battery charger, in the same spot where the regular batteries used to be. There's plenty of space, but I had to remove all the extra plastic and components to make it fit. Now I've soldered the battery to the power input of the mini DVR and to the camera's original switch to see if it's powered on. I've also connected this micro SD card extension, which will allow me to access the video content without having to open the camera every time I need it. As you can see, I've connected the monitor to run the first test. I turn on the switch and yes, the mini DVR is powered on, and after a dramatic pause the monitor is receiving a signal. So great, we can move forward. Since the voltage booster will be inside the camera, I'm going to install this USB-C female extension on the outside so I can charge the battery without having to open the battery cover. I'll use my mini drill to make the hole, and as you can see, it fits perfectly. Now I just need to solder it to the voltage booster. It's super easy to do since everything is clearly marked. Now let's test it. As you can see, the charging LED lights up, so that's great, it's working. Now just for security, I'm going to glue everything in place. Let's test everything again, but this time with all the pieces we've installed so far in place. As we can see, everything is still working correctly. Now I'm going to reinstall the power LED, but for that, I need to add a 240 ohm resistor to prevent it from burning out. And there we go. The next step is to solder the camera's video output to the mini DVR's video input. I've made this diagram to clearly show where each wire should be soldered on the connector. I soldered a yellow wire to the camera's white wire to use more universal colors, so the yellow wire goes to the video input and the black wires goes to ground. Let's do a quick test. Now the camera is connected to the mini DVR input and the mini DVR output is connected to the monitor. As we can see, everything is working fine. We can now record video directly on the mini DVR. Now let's move on the audio. As I mentioned before, I'm going to reuse the camera's microphone, so I just need to solder the green wire to ground and the white wire to the audio input following the diagram. Since the camera's microphone is mono and the mini DVR has a stereo audio input, what I did was bridge the two inputs with a wire to make sure there's no loss of audio gain. Let's keep going. The mini DVR has this small LED that blinks when it's recording. What I want to do is reroute this light to the front LED on the camera so I will know when it's actually recording video. To do this, I need to solder the LED wires to the solder points on the mini DVR's LED. Honestly, this is the trickiest part of the project, or at least for me, because the solder points are extremely small. Any mistake could damage the LED or disconnect it. and I will lose the ability to know when the mini DVR is recording, so I was really nervous, but thankfully everything went well. As you can see, when I press the record button on the mini DVR, the front LED is now blinking. I was so happy to get it working. Now I want to install external buttons on the camera casing, so I can use both the record button and the other two action buttons to access the menu without having to open the camera. I had bought these buttons, but they were too big, so I got these other ones that are a bit smaller. I'll start with the most important one, the record button. I'm going to make a hole in the camera's original button to insert the new button and then solder it to the mini DVR, and this way it can be used like a normal camcorder from the 90s. For that, I'll once again use my portable mini drill. Now the button fits perfectly. Now, I'll prepare the button by soldering two wires to it. These wires will be soldered to the record button on the mini DVR. I need to solder to the side points of the original button, and I have to be very careful since those points are extremely small. But as you can see, it's not impossible. To be honest, it was a little bit easier than I thought. Now when I press the button, the recording light starts blinking, so success! For the remaining two buttons, it's the same process. I've decided to install them in this part of the casing, so I'll use my drill again. Now, both buttons fits perfectly. I've already got the buttons prepared with wires. I just need to solder them to the buttons on the mini DVR like we did earlier. And here's how they turn out. It looks difficult, but it was easier than I expected. I did some tests by connecting it to the monitor and everything worked perfectly. I was really happy. Now, for the final step, I'm going to add a video output. To do that, I'll solder a 4-pole 3.5mm female connector. If you've seen any of my other mods, this component will look familiar to you. I've decided to put it here, so you guessed it, I'm going to drill a hole. Looks neat and clean. This is the pinout of the connector, so we just need to match its points with the diagram we saw earlier for the mini DVR, and this way we'll have a video output if we want to use an external monitor. I've got the connector with the wires ready. Now following the diagram, let's solder it to the video output points on the mini DVR. I think I forgot to record the part where I'm soldering it, but it's not complicated. You just need to follow the diagrams. Well, I call them diagrams, but they're really just my ugly sketches. Anyway, this is how it looks once it's soldered. Alright, let's test it. I've got the monitor connected. I turn on the camera and perfect, it's all working correctly. I thought we were done, but I completely forgot there's still one more step, installing the microSD card extender, but it's simple. As you can see, it connects where the microSD card goes. Now I just need to figure out where to place it, and I think the most logical option is to make an opening at the bottom and glue it there. And yep, this is another job for my drill. That drill cost me around $20 and it's definitely been one of the best investments I ever made. Here's how it looks once it's glued in place. Now I can access the microSD card without having to open the camera. Before wrapping up this project, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who supports this small channel. Honestly, every like, comment and subscription makes a difference. If you enjoyed this video or any others on my channel, it will help me a lot if you left a like and a comment. That way, you help YouTube recommend my videos a bit more. This is a hobby I love, but recording videos takes a lot of time and effort. It completely consumes my free days, and with a full-time job, it's challenging. So if you help me out in that way, you'll be motivating me to keep making these videos. I really appreciate all the support. Thank you so much. Back to the project, this is how it looks once everything is assembled. Beautiful, right? Now, all that's left is to give it one final test. I'm going to connect my monitor to the external video output we installed. Turn on the camera, and we have video. This has been a project that, although it took me a lot of time, I've honestly enjoyed every part of the process. Up next, I'll be trying to integrate a mini DVR into a 1960s black and white camera in a similar way to make it fully autonomous. Let me know in the comments if you will be interested in a video on that, but for now, I will enjoy my fully autonomous and functional 2001 Barbie camera. Definitely planning to shoot some music videos with this beauty. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.